Hello, Year 3. Welcome to our topic for the afternoon. This is your topic for Monday the 11th. And as you can see, today we are going to be learning about an event from World War II called the Blitz. And we are going to find out what the Blitz was and which areas of the country it affected. And we're also going to have a look at where the bombing raids took place. So just to give you a little bit of a recap from last week's lessons, Britain was on the side of the Allies, okay? And there were lots of other countries that was on the same side as the Allies. And you can see there were France, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, China, USA, and Russia. And they didn't all start at the same time, but during the war, more countries came to help Britain in their fight against Germany. Now, the countries that were on the side of the Germans were known as the Axis power, okay, and that was Germany, Italy, and Japan. So they were the main countries that the Allies were fighting. So it was really important to try and remember that there were lots of countries that were involved, and that's why it was called a world war, because so many different countries from all of the world were involved in the war. Okay, and here's a little bit of our timeline. Okay, a reminder of things that happened. And we talked last time, didn't we, about how in 1933, Hitler became what was called the German Chancellor. And that's when he started to decide that he wanted to change things in his country. And we've got there in 1938, he invaded Austria, and that's when the different parts of the world really started to worry. Okay, so that is our timeline from when the war started in 1939. You can see there, that's when the then British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, and you will have heard that message that he gave out to everyone on the radio. And he said, unfortunately, we are now at war with Germany. So that's our timeline. And what we can do is we can add to that once we learn more and more things that happened during World War II. So, the Blitz. In September 1940, the Germans decided that they were going to start bombing parts of Britain during the night. Okay, now the word the Blitz, okay, actually comes from a German word. And that word is Blitzkrieg, okay? And what that means is lightning war, basically. So the Blitz was an event that took place over a long time. And the first time that it happened was on the 7th of September, 1940. And that was the first night that the German planes bombed London. Now, this then lasted for another 56 out of 57 nights. So every night in London, the Germans tried to bomb the city. So for 56 out of 57, that's almost 2 months. Okay, they had this constant barrage of planes every night. Now I want you to have a think, and I want you to think, why do you think the Germans decided to bomb London? Okay, maybe pause the video and have a think about why the Germans chose to bomb London. Okay, so some of the reasons, you might have thought of some different reasons, okay, but some of the reasons was that, one, Hitler thought that if he bombed London, okay, and everyone else in Britain saw how terrible things were, Hitler hoped that this would mean that the British would give up, okay, and all their strength at battling the Germans would have gone, and Hitler hoped that by making everything just really, really horrible for the people, they would say, actually, do you know what, we surrender. Right? And Hitler hoped that that would mean that he could invade Britain. Another reason that the Germans decided they wanted to bomb London was because there were lots of factories there, and it was a really important part of the industrial structure of the rest of the country. But what he also did is he decided that he was going to damage lots of other parts of Britain as well. Okay, lots of places that had factories and ports. And what this would mean is it would be really difficult for the British to produce their weapons in the factory and then be able to move them around the country. So he thought he could disrupt things that way. But what happened was that he bombed lots of other cities, and there was a large population in a lot of these cities. Okay, and thousands of people were killed because of the bombing raids that happened during the Blitz. And this is one of them. This is in Liverpool. And Liverpool was bombed 3 nights in a row by the Germans in December 1940. And lots of historical buildings, just like in London, and just not far from here, like places like Birmingham and Coventry, lots of historical buildings were bombed. But people like the civil defence workers and the firefighters, they tried really hard to save the buildings from any serious damage. And you can see there, that's a building that has been quite seriously damaged on the outside. So here you go. Here is a map of Britain, and I have put Liverpool on the map. And I want you to pause the video and have a think and have a chat with why you think Liverpool was one of the places that were chosen, bearing in mind what we've already talked about and what I've mentioned about different cities. Have a look and see if you can see why you think Liverpool was one of the places that was bombed by the Germans. So hopefully you've identified that Liverpool is a port, okay, and that means it has, it's by the sea and has lots of deliveries on ships, bringing in lots of different things, and also that is how lots of things get sent around the world. So hopefully you spotted it was a port. And also Liverpool had a really big population as well, so that really affected what we would call the morale of the town or the city. Okay, so again, remember we talked about the fact that London was bombed, okay, so that hopefully Hitler wanted people to surrender and the government to surrender to him. I want you to also have a think. So as I said, the port of Liverpool also had lots of ships which delivered food and other supplies from the USA, so from America and from Canada. What do you think would have happened if that had been disrupted? So if there were lots of bombings happening in the port and they couldn't deliver those things, what do you think would have happened? And this is another reason why Hitler targeted these places. So again, pause the video and have a think about why you think that would have happened. So hopefully you would have been discussing the fact that people were worried because if certain supplies couldn't come into the country, so things like food and other essential supplies, okay, that would have had a really big impact on the country, wouldn't it? Because it would have meant that food that comes from abroad couldn't come into the country, okay, and it would have been another reason why the population of Britain would have been struggling as a result of the bombings. So here are a few things that the British did to try and stop the air raids. Okay, so have a look at those and I want you to think, what are they? What are these pictures showing me? And then we will discuss what they are and exactly how it helped the British to stop the bombs. Okay, so this first picture is showing what is called an anti-aircraft gunfire. Okay, anti-aircraft gunfire. And what this did is there were special people who used to try and spot the planes coming into the country. Okay, and what would happen is that the anti-aircraft gunfire would try and shoot at the planes that were coming in to stop them ever getting to the big cities where the Blitz was taking place. And you can also see here, there are lots of spotlights here. And what the hope was that these would actually blind the pilots. And again, it would make their lives really difficult and stop them from being able to carry out what was called their mission. Okay, so that would hopefully happen before they got to London or Coventry or Liverpool or the big cities. did anyone work out what these are? Now, if you said that they were blackout blinds, then well done you. That's what these are. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in another lesson, but blackout blinds meant that all the light from the house was unable to get through, so that the people in the air would find it really difficult to be able to spot where the towns and cities were. And every night, all the households had to put up their blackout blinds, and there were wardens that would go around checking that they couldn't see anything and they couldn't see any gaps to then alert the pilot. So blackout blinds were really important. And you can see also on here that there is also tape on the windows. Okay, and what that did is that was to try and protect the people. So if there was a bomb, the tape on the window would try and protect them so that the glass wouldn't smash everywhere. But these are the blackout blinds, and you can see these two ladies having to put their blackout blinds out for the night so that they wouldn't get told off if they hadn't done them. Now, this funny thing, I would be so impressed if anyone worked out what this was called. It's called a barrage balloon. Okay, a barrage balloon. Now, what this did is it's what we would call maybe a blimp, if you've heard of that. And they would fly right above the cities, right in the air. And what it would mean is that the pilots had to fly even higher to make sure that they wouldn't hit the barrage balloon, because if you were in a plane and you hit that, it would destroy your plane. So the pilots had to make sure that they flew high enough over the cities. And you can see this here. This is what we call Tower Bridge. And I think this is the Tower of London maybe, but I'm not entirely sure. But these would have been high above the city. And what it would mean is, because the planes were flying even higher, it would mean they weren't able to be as accurate as they were hoping to be. So they couldn't be specific on where their bombs were dropping. So what it meant is it meant that the pilots and the mission wasn't as successful as they were hoping for that night. Okay, what's this one? So this is a car, and it says, "Look out in the blackout." And I wonder if you or anyone that you were talking to knew what this was. Well, this was an advert, and it was reminding people that what they had to do is, during the Blitz, everybody's car lights were covered over, and all the street lamps, there were no street lamps. Okay, because what it meant is that once it was nighttime, they tried to make the city as dark as possible. So what it meant actually is that if you were outside at night when it was dark, it was quite dangerous. And there were lots of reports that people used to walk into lampposts and things, because I think we forget, don't we, if we were walking around, if there was no light whatsoever, and it was in sort of September and October, so it was when it was getting dark. Okay, and there were lots of people who were injured during the Blitz, but not from the bombings, but because it was so dark outside. So you had to have your, you can see here, you had to have your indicators dimmed. You weren't allowed to have your inside light on. So when you got in your car, you weren't allowed to have your light on. Your side lamps had to be dimmed. Okay, and so it was really quite dangerous, but all of these things were to try and make it as dark as possible, so that it was really difficult to see where a city was and to see where there were lots of population living. So all of these things were to try and stop the Germans from being successful in their bombing missions. Here we go. So these are pictures, and I would like you to have a look at them, pause the video, and have a look and see what you think these people are doing to keep themselves safe. So these are all different things that people had to do to keep themselves safe. So have a look, pause the video, and see if you know what any of these are. Okay, so this one here, this is actually a gas mask. Okay, and nearly everybody in the country was given a gas mask. and you used to have it in a little box, and you used to have to carry it everywhere that you went. And if you see pictures of children as evacuees, you will see that they had these around their necks. Now, the really lucky thing with this is that lots of the population had them and nobody ever had to use them. So that was a really lucky thing. But everybody had a gas mask to keep them safe. Now, does anybody know what this funny looking thing here is? It's high up. Looks like it might be something like a speaker. If you said you thought this was an air raid siren, then well done you guys, because that's exactly what it is. This is an air raid siren, okay? And what happened is this would go off, and it was incredibly loud, and it wasn't a very nice sound. And it would go off, and it'd be, see, I told you it's not a very nice sound. And it would make a really loud sound so that people knew that there was an air raid coming. And what people would have to do is they would have to protect themselves, so get indoors or something like that, because they knew that the air raid was coming. And that was because of the spotters. Do you remember when we saw the anti-aircraft guns and the spotters? Okay, that was all from them realizing that an air raid was coming. Wasn't a very nice sound. Maybe you could try searching up the sound, but I can tell you it wasn't a very nice sound. Okay, here. What do we think this is here? So this is what's called an Anderson shelter. Okay, and these were in people's gardens. And what would happen is the air raid would go off, people would collect their gas masks. You can see here, look, they've all got their gas masks, and they would go down to the bottom of the garden into this little shelter that was made out of corrugated iron. And it wasn't very nice in there at all. It was very cramped. It was very smelly. There wasn't much to do in there. It was probably really, really cold. Okay, and we will look at that in more detail to come. But that was at the bottom of the garden, and it was called an Anderson shelter. Now, does anybody know what this one here is? This is a funny thing, and it looks a little bit like a rabbit hutch, doesn't it? Okay, and this is called a Morrison shelter. And my boy was talking about this the other day and was calling it an Asda shelter. And I was saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? And we finally realised he meant a Morrison shelter. So this is a Morrison shelter. And this was for people who didn't have a garden. So this was for people who didn't have a garden, so couldn't have an Anderson shelter. Okay, and what some people would have done is some people would have gone and used the underground tube stations. If they were really close to a tube, they would have run to a tube station and could have used that for shelter. But if you didn't have that or couldn't get there in time, this is what you had in your house. And what it meant is that the contraption was built so that you could lie in there, and then hopefully if there was a bombing raid and something happened to your house, you would be protected underneath there. And that was called a Morrison shelter. So there were lots of things that the British people tried to do to keep themselves safe. Now, I just wanted to share with you a couple of pictures so that you could see what the Blitz in London looked like. So I don't know if you recognise where this is, but this was Buckingham Palace. So even Buckingham Palace was bombed during the Blitz. And there's lots of pictures that you can see of the king looking at the damage that happened at Buckingham Palace. So even the king and queen, their house was bombed during the Blitz. This is a picture of London, and you can see that the firefighters are trying to put out the fire that's happened in the building. So that's another picture of a London street that has been affected by the bombing. And this is quite a famous picture of the Blitz. So this was taken one night by a man who worked for a newspaper. He was just going back to his newspaper, and he was stood on a high part of the building and saw this picture. And this here is called St. Paul's Cathedral. And he took this picture, and it became quite a famous picture of how the Blitz was and what it was like living during the Blitz. There we go, there's the gas mask. There's the air raid siren. There's that Anderson shouter. And there's that Morrison shouter. Okay, so for your work this afternoon, I would like you to draw a mind map, or maybe some of the way that you like to record the information. And you are going to tell me two different things. First of all, you're going to tell me how people tried to make it difficult for the Germans to bomb cities. So what did they do? What did the British do to try and make it difficult for the Germans to succeed on their missions? Okay, if you go back in the PowerPoint, there's details there, and you can re-listen to me talking about it, or there's pictures to remind you there. So that's the first thing. I want a mind map, or maybe a different way that you're going to record your information. And then in a different colour, if you're doing a mind map on a separate page, I want you to tell me what people did to keep themselves safe during an air raid. So all those things we talked about with the Anderson shouter and the gas masks, I want you to tell me a little bit about those things. So if you can give me some really good sentences, I want some really good information of the things that we have learned this afternoon. If you have the ability to maybe find out a little bit more information, so if you're lucky enough to have any books or have access to the internet, then more information is obviously brilliant. But I want to see some really good details of how. So first one is how the British tried to protect the people from the German bombing raids during the Blitz. And the second one is what the British people did to keep themselves safe. Okay, year 3. So hopefully there's lots of information there for you to find. And this is the piece of work that you are going to send for your teachers to see today. So I'm sure they're looking forward to seeing those as much as I am. And we look forward to seeing all of that information when you send the details in today. So don't forget to put your name and your class in your subject, and we shall speak to you tomorrow.